So Justin, you've kind of got a government organisation or another institution. You've decided that they might have some useful data sets. What do you kind of look for when you're evaluating that data to see if it's of any use to you?
Yeah, so there are a few steps that we'll go through in order to figure out whether we should onboard a source of open data. The first is looking at the characteristics of the data itself. And there are really sort of 5 criteria that we pay attention to when we evaluate a source of data. It's the accuracy of the information, or what we judge, how accurate we judge the information to be, how complete it is, so the sort of fill rates for the various data fields that are being reported on, the temporality of the data, and by that I mean issues around the sort of timeliness, the frequency, the latency of how fresh the data is, how often it's updated. Then there's the uniqueness of the data, and largely for open data, it's not going to be that unique. It's part of the kind of comes on the tin in the sense that it's open, so it's available to anybody. But oftentimes we're able to combine a source of open data with another data set we have to create something unique. So you also look at the way that the data might be combined with other data assets that you have to deliver something of value. And then the final thing is just the consistency of the data. So that could be the format that the data is presented in, or consistencies and across the data set. So once you've sort of evaluated it on that basis, you then look to see what's involved in actually onboarding and linking that data. So at Duedil, we're creating the world's largest source of private company information, and we do this by gathering together and linking authoritative sources from not just open data, but all types of data. And so when we're looking to bring on open data, we want to see how it will link up with these other sources of data that we have, and how much of a challenge that will be.
Once you've decided to maybe integrate some form of open data within your products and services, what kind of risks do you need to consider?
Well, the one big risk is that it's actually going to be useful to somebody, and so there's a lot of work that goes on before we even decide to bring a data set on board to validate the impact that data will have for a customer in solving a specific customer problem. So we want to understand who the customer is, what their workflow is, where the points of friction are in that workflow, and really what an ideal solution might look like for them. And that really helps provide us with a framework that we can then insert open data into along that user journey. So I'd say understanding how the data is going to be applied is probably the first thing that one really needs to do when you're evaluating whether or not the information should be onboarded.
Cool. Are there any risks you might get around sort of the kind of data being, well, not released as often as it should be, or kind of difficulties around maybe the quality of the data, if it's
Sure.
kind of there's missing components and things like that to consider?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things that we've seen is that not always, but sometimes with sources of open data, because it's being released effectively as a public good, you don't have the same considerations given to a source of open data as you might to a commercial data set in terms of maintaining the data or making sure that it's released on regular intervals. So there's definitely a risk around that. I think that's a risk that we try and mitigate as much as possible. And I think part of it is about being kind of open with your users about what the sources of data are, and notifying them if there are issues or delays around the delivery of a particular data set.
Thinking about the kind of publication of open data that you have as an organization that's based around data, you must have stacks of the stuff. How do you decide what exactly to open to the open data user community? What are the steps and processes to decide what exactly to open and what to keep closed?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think in terms of deciding what we release and what we keep closed, there's an extent to which we look at what is already open and available. So, any time we bring in information, there's a certain amount of value that we add in terms of standardizing that information or maybe putting it into slightly better context. So a good example of this is that we bring in dozens and dozens of sources to construct a profile on an individual company. Now, there will be information about that company that comes from Companies House. There will be information about that company that comes from other sources. You could obviously go to any of these individual sources and pull down information on that company yourself. But there's value in sort of bringing it together and presenting a unified view. I think, our attitude has always been that we want to do as much as we can to make a base level of this information open and accessible to people so that they can understand the high level risks or opportunities of interacting with a business or a director. But then for what we would consider to be deeper or premium level data or functionality, that would be something that we would expect our users to pay for.
I guess there's two parts towards the next question then. So in terms of how you engage with the open data community and the movement, how do you engage with publishers of open data? Do you meet with those guys, different government departments on a regular basis and interact with them?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think engagement with data providers, whether they're public sources of data or private data providers, is that's a regular a kind of regular thing that we do at Duedil. We have to. Those are our inputs, right? That's basically how we build our product and how we deliver value to our customers. I think our interest has sort of gone beyond a typical customer-supplier relationship in that the need to sort of publish this information or the good of publishing this information is something that is felt very deeply in the DNA of people within the business, and so we're on a number of advisory panels, we both formally and informally with different government departments around technology policy, data policy. I'm also a co-founder and sit on the board of an organization called Innovate Finance, which is a fintech members organization, and there are some applications there of open data specifically for financial services. So, I'd say government engagement is sort of one part of what we do in terms of working with the community. The other part that we do is just the distribution of this information back into the community. So we make our APIs available to various industry sandboxes and things such as General Assembly. We've worked with a number of the accelerators to provide our APIs into the accelerators and make those freely available. So I think this is for this to work, it's very much a matter of both giving guidance, but then also giving back and kind of putting your money where your mouth is. And so one of the things that we're excited about as part of this newest release of our API is the fact that a developer will be able to come to Duedil, get a key auto-assigned, and immediately start working with live data. And with the exception of a few premium endpoints, have access to pretty much 90+%.
I guess just to dig a little bit deeper, what do you think are the best ways to engage with the developer community? You've kind of mentioned already how you sort of run, I guess, hack days and various initiatives. Do you kind of engage by sort of email and blogs as well with other developers?
We do. So a number of our developers will contribute to open source projects. Posts information on in GitHub. We also host a number of events here in our office. So a few weeks back, we hosted a joint event with one of our customers, Currency Cloud, around the use of APIs and some of the developments that both of our teams were working on in terms of our enhancements to our APIs. And in a few weeks' time, we're actually going to be hosting another external hackathon with a series of partners, kind of bringing together different APIs, and some of those will be sources that use open data quite regularly in building their products, and others will be private sources of data. But I think it's not really just a sort of open or not open data type thing. It's really looking at how by bringing together different sources of information, you can build something that's useful and solve someone's problem.
Thinking about Duedil as an organisation and its business model, where exactly does open data fit? Is it kind of throughout the business, or is it in just specific particular areas?
So open data is a core input to the product that we build for our customers. So Duedil operates as a SaaS platform. So it's a software as a service offering where someone can go on, get a license to our product, log on to the website, and immediately start interacting with the millions and millions of companies that we have in our product. We've actually just announced that we've expanded our coverage from the 11 million UK and Irish companies to 40 million companies across Europe. So within the next couple weeks, that information will be available on our site and will also be available via our API. So when we think about how that actually gets deployed within a customer, there are really three elements to it. So it's the data that we provide, and obviously open data forms a big part of that. It's the insight that our customers are able to extract from that data via the tools that we build for them. And then the final part is gains that can be made through automation or integrating that information and insight into the customer's workflow. So those are really the three ways that we transform our customers' business via data, insight, and automation.